Oh, hey! You found me. I will find some music and see if anybody else finds me. People tell me that I gotta go, and then they say I gotta stay. I gotta move on with the river flows, and they can't make me wait. I'm only doing what I wanna do. They don't see eye to eye with me. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming to find me at this fresh link. Apparently, if you're scheduling a YouTube live stream ahead of time, you have to specify whether it's going to be through professional streaming software or webcam. And if you don't specify, it will automatically assume that you use professional streaming software. And if you try to edit that retroactively, screw you. If the delay seems too harsh to you, Matt, and you want to mute your laptop and just listen in person, that's understandable. Oh, okay, glad that I'm not the only one who has had struggles with getting used to YouTube. I think I got a little bit overconfident tonight because last week I was like, oh yeah, no, okay, I've got it. I know how it works now. I mean, maybe. What does OBS stand for? Okay. I do like learning about technology. Just don't know if I'll get to it this week. Thank you for the gin and tonic, Matt. It's delightful. I had been planning to offer a bit of a recap if there's anybody new joining us, but I think it, may be the same few who were here last week, so I will probably just get right back into the reading, especially considering this did not get off the ground on time. So we left off with 5 preteen junior high school students who were cowering behind a crumbling, half-finished wall as a Hawkbeiger controller was taking notice of them. Chapter 5. The Hawkbeiger pointed his gun, or whatever it was, around at the darkness. His snake head swerved left and right, trying to penetrate the gloom. Silence, the Andalite warned us. Hawkbeiger do not see well in darkness, but their hearing is very good. The Hawkbeiger moved closer still. He was 6 feet away now, with just the low wall between us. He had to have heard my heart pounding. Maybe he didn't know what the sound was. Maybe he didn't recognize the sounds of five terrified kids whose knees were quivering and teeth were chattering. Kids who were breathing in short, sudden gasps. I was sure I was going to die right then. I could see in my mind the way those vicious wrist and elbow blades were going to slice my head from my body. If you've never been really afraid, let me tell you, it does things to you. It takes over your mind and your body. You want to scream, you want to run, you want to wet your pants, you want to throw yourself down on the ground and cry and beg, please, 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 please don't kill me. And if you think you're brave, well, wait till you're cowered a few feet away from a monster who can turn you into coleslaw in about 3 seconds flat. But then the Andalite's voice was in my head again. Courage, my friends. And this warm, I don't have any words to explain it. It was just this warmth that spread all through me. It was like when you're a little kid and you've had a terrible nightmare and you've woken up screaming. You know how you used to feel better when your mom or dad would turn on the light and come in and sit beside your bed? That's what it was like. I mean, I was still terrified. The Hawkbeiger was still there, so real and so deadly. I could hear him breathing. I could smell him. But at the same time, I could feel the panic coming under control. I could feel the strength flowing from the doomed Andalite. He was letting us borrow some of his courage, even though he must have been afraid himself. The Hawkbeiger moved away. Something new was coming from the blade ship. Shaking and chattering, I rose high enough to look over the low wall. Every Hawkbeiger and every taxon was turned toward the ship now. They're all standing at attention, I whispered. How can you tell? Marco whispered back. Who knows when a jelly-eyed centipede or a walking salad shooter from hell is standing at attention? Then he appeared. Visser 3, the Andalite said. Visser 3 was an Andalite. Or at least he was an Andalite controller. What the? Rachel said. Isn't that an Andalite? Only once has a Yeerk been able to take over an Andalite body, the Andalite said. There is only one Andalite controller. That one is Visser 3. Visser 3 walked confidently toward the wounded Andalite. The Visser seemed so much like the Andalite, it was hard to tell them apart at first. He had the same mouthless face, the same extra stalk eyes that turned here and there, checking out everything in all directions, the same powerful yet sleek, four-legged body, and the same wicked tail. But if the Visser looked like any normal Andalite, he felt different. It was like he was wearing a mask, only you just knew that under the fake sweetness of the mask there was something twisted and foul. Well, well, Visser 3 said. I almost had a heart attack when I realized I was hearing the Visser's thoughts. Can he hear our thoughts? Cassie whispered. If he can't, we're so dead, I don't even want to think about it, Rachel told her. He cannot hear your thoughts, the Andalite said. As long as you don't direct them to him, you hear as long as you don't direct them to him. You hear his thoughts because he is broadcasting them for all to hear. This is a great victory for him, so he wants all to hear. What have we here? A meddling Andalite? Visser 3 looked more closely at the Andalite ship. Ah, but no ordinary Andalite warrior. Prince Alfangor Surian al-Shamtu, if I am not mistaken. An honor to meet you. You're a legend. How many of our fighters have you shredded? 7? Or was it 8 by the time the battle ended? The Andalite didn't answer, but I had the feeling maybe it had been more than 8. The very last Andalite in this sector of space. Yes, I'm afraid your dome ship has been completely destroyed. Completely. I watched it burn as it fell into the atmosphere of this little world. There will be others, the Andalite prince said. The Visser took a step closer to the Andalite. Yes, and when they come, it will be too late. This world will be mine. My own contribution to the Yerk Empire, our greatest conquest, and then I'll be Visser 1. What you want with these humans? The Andalite asked. You have your Taxon allies, you have your Hawkbeiger slaves, and other slaves from other worlds. Why these people? Because there are so many, and they are so weak, Visser 3 sneered. Billions of bodies, and they have no idea what's happening. With this many hosts, we can spread throughout the universe, unstoppable. Billions of us. We'll have to build 1,000 New York pools just to raise. We'll have to build 1,000 New York pools just to raise Yerks for half this number of bodies. Face it, Andalite, you have fought well and bravely, but you have lost. Visser 3 stepped right up to the Andalite. I could feel the Andalite's fear, but rather than cower, he fought the pain of his wound and climbed to his feet. He knew he was going to die. He wanted to die on his feet, looking his enemy in the face. But Visser 3 was not done taunting his foe. I promise you one thing, Prince Alfangor. When we have this planet, with its rich harvest of bodies, we will move against the Andalite homeworld. I will personally hunt down your family, and I will personally oversee the placement of my most faithful lieutenants in their heads. I hope that they will resist, so I can hear their minds scream. The Andalite struck. His tail whipped up and over so fast you couldn't really see it. The Visser twisted his head aside. The Andalite's tail blade missed the Visser's head by a bare half-inch, but it sliced into his shoulder. Blood, or something like blood, sprayed from the wound. Yes, I hissed. Oh! I could hear the Visser's howl of pain in my head. At the same time, a blinding beam of blue light shot from the tail of the Andalite ship. It sliced into the nearest bug fighter. Hawkbeiger and Taxon scattered. Even crouching behind the wall, I could feel a wave of blistering heat. The bug fighter sizzled and disappeared. Fire! Visser 3 yelled. Burn his ship! The night exploded in blinding light. Red beams lanced from the blade ship and the remaining bug fighter. The Andalite ship glowed, and with a strange slowness, disintegrated. Then, in the flash and glow of the Dracon beams, I saw, or thought I saw, humans. A small group of them, maybe 3 or 4, back in the shadows behind the Visser. There are people over there, I told Marco. What? Are they prisoners? Take the Andalite, Visser 3 ordered his soldiers. Hold him for me. 3 big Hawkbeiger grabbed the Andalite and held him down. Their wrist blades were at his throat, but they knew better than to kill him. That was to be Visser 3's personal privilege. Then we saw why a Yerk as powerful as Visser 3 would inhabit the only captured Andalite body. As we watched, Visser 3 began to morph. His Andalite head grew larger, much larger. The 4 horse-like legs merged into 2 and then expanded, each leg becoming as big around as a redwood tree. The delicate Andalite arms sprouted and became tentacles. "This isn't real," Cassie whispered. "This isn't real." In the hideously bloated head, a mouth appeared. It was filled with teeth as long as your arm. The mouth grew wider and wider, becoming a monstrous, terrifying grin. There was nothing left of the Andalite body. A monster had taken its place. Sorry. The roar of the beast Visser 3 had become made the ground shake. Guess I should be louder. I covered my ears with my hands. My teeth rattled from the sound. I heard someone whimpering. It was me. Visser 3 had become a monster that made the Hawkbeiger and the Taxon look like harmless toys. He reached out with one thick tentacle and grabbed the Andalite by the neck. No, no, no. I heard Cassie whispering over and over again. No, 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 no. Don't look, Rachel said to her. She put her arm around Cassie's shoulder and held her close. Then she reached for Tobias and took his hand. I guess you never really know someone until you see them scared. I guess you never really know someone until you see them scared, and even scared to death, with tears running down her face. Rachel had strength to spare. Visser 3 lifted the Andalite straight up in the air. Visser 3 lifted the Andalite straight up in the air, tearing him away from the grasp of the Hawkbeiger. The Andalite prince struck again and again with his tail, but each strike was like a pinprick against such creature. Visser 3 held the Andalite high in the air, and then Visser 3 opened his wide mouth. Chapter 6. I don't know what came over me right then. I had been so afraid, so terrified. But it was like something just snapped in my head. I couldn't just hide and watch. I couldn't. You filthy! I jumped to my feet. I snatched up a piece of rusted iron pipe from the ground and started to climb over that wall. I guess I just went crazy or something. It had to be craziness, because there was no way that I, alone, armed with a piece of pipe, was going to accomplish anything. No! The Andalite's silent cry made me hesitate. I felt Marco's hands grabbing at my shirt and pulling me back. Tobias and Marco held me down. Rachel put her hand over my mouth. I was trying to scream or curse or something. Shut up, you idiot, Marco hissed. You're just going to get us all killed. Jake, don't. Jake, don't. Cassie put her hand on my cheek. He doesn't want you to die for him. Don't you realize? He's dying for us. I shoved Marco and Tobias away angrily, but I was in control of myself again. I peeked over the wall again. The Andalite prince was helpless in the grasp of Visser 3. I saw him held high in the air. I saw Visser 3 open his monstrous, gaping jaws. I saw the Andalite fall whole into that open mouth. The mouth closed. The teeth ripped the Andalite apart. And the Andalite, War Prince Elfangar Surian al-Shamtul, died. At the very end, he cried out. His cry of despair was in our heads. His cry will always be in our heads. The Hawkbeiger controllers began making a huffing sound, like whoo, whoo, whoo. Maybe they were laughing or applauding. The taxon controllers rushed forward and crowded around Visser 3. The taxon controllers rushed forward and crowded around Visser 3. They seemed to be stretching up toward him, and then I saw why. A piece of the Andalite fell from the Visser's jaws, and the nearest taxon greedily gobbled it up. Tobias turned away and covered his face with his hands. Cassie had tears streaming from her eyes. So did I. I heard a sound that was strange because it was so normal. It was laughter. Human laughter. The humans, the human controllers, because that's what they were laughing, like they were at some kind of a show. For a moment, it seemed to me that one of those laughing voices was familiar, like I'd heard it before. But then the sound was swallowed up in the huffing of the Hawkbeiger. Visser 3 morphed out of his monstrous form and slowly regained his Andalite body. Ah, I heard him think. Sorry, guys. Ah, I heard him think. Nothing like a good Ontarian bogmore for taking a bite out of your enemies. Again, the human controllers laughed, and the Hawkbeiger controllers huffed, and I heard a familiar human laugh I could not quite place. Marco started throwing up. It was an understandable thing to do. But somehow that sound caught the attention of the nearest Hawkbeiger. The snake head turned. The snake had turned. He was perfectly still. We were perfectly still. The Hawkbeiger turned toward us. The nearsighted eyes were aimed directly at our little hiding place. I don't know who panicked first. Maybe it was me. Maybe we just all had all the fear and horror we could stand. It was like an electric shock went through all of us. It was like an electric shock went through all of us, and we were running before I had a chance to even know what I was doing. I ran. I gasped for air. A cry. Antarian? With an A, but otherwise, yes. Antarian bogs. A cry went up from the Hawkbeiger. Split up, I yelled. They can't follow all of us. Marco and Tobias and Cassie took off in 3 different directions. Rachel was still right beside me. Glancing back, I saw the Hawkbeiger hesitate, unsure of who to chase. Rachel and I are the fastest runners. Tobias is totally out of shape. And Marco and Cassie are both too short to be really fast. So I figured if the aliens were going to chase anyone, it ought to be us. I guess Rachel thought the same thing. She slowed down just a little and began yelling and waving her arms. Come on, you... And then she said some words I didn't realize Rachel knew. The 2 nearest Hawkbeiger snapped around and took off after us. Gafrash, here! Gafrash fit, enemy, get! Even in my panic, it surprised me. They were talking some mix of their own alien language and ours. Gafrash fit naher, I get, I kill! I ran. Suddenly, my foot slammed something and I was down. I hit the ground hard. The wind was knocked out of me. I tried to fill my lungs again. Rachel ran on. She didn't know I had fallen. A spear, sorry, a spear of red light struck a concrete pipe just beside me. The concrete vaporized. The two Hawkbeiger were coming after us, bounding like some devil kangaroos. I was up and running again. Rachel must have realized I wasn't with her anymore. She stopped and started to come back toward me. Don't be an idiot, I yelled. Run! She hesitated just for a second, but she knew she couldn't do anything more for me. She ran. I saw a dark hole ahead and raced toward it. A doorway. Inside, it was black as a grave. It was one of the buildings that had been almost completed, just bare concrete walls and scattered junk. But I knew I had been in here before. Marco and I had walked all through it. There were hallways and little side rooms. It was like a maze. Marco? Rachel? Had they gotten away? And what about Cassie and Tobias? I tried to get my brain to concentrate as I scurried across the first big room. There was a corridor, somewhere. I groped in the dark and found a wall. I don't know if you can hear him. That was Gilgamesh coming to join me. He was a little noisy about it. Hey, buddy. I heard the sound of claw-like feet, huge, tearing, rending claw feet scraping over the bare concrete. A bottle went skittering across the floor. The Hawkbeiger was close, and in the total darkness, my superior human vision wasn't much use anymore. But I knew my way around the empty building. At least I would have known my way around if my brain had been working. I felt my hand go into an emptiness, a doorway. Yes, it led down a hallway. I went through just as a light came on behind. I went through the doorway just as the light came on behind me. Someone had brought a flashlight. Evnututel fale noye fit, whatever order. No need to capture them. Whoever you find, kill. The first voice had been Hawkbeiger. The second voice was human. And the weird thing was, that voice sounded familiar. I tried to think. I knew I'd heard that voice somewhere. Where? Just save the head, the human told the Hawkbeiger. Bring that to me and we can identify it. I slid quickly along the wall. The light followed, just steps behind me. I racked my brains. Had there been a passageway? Yes, there it was. As silently as I could, I slipped into it. The flashlight beam was just inches behind me. I kicked something soft. Hey! It was a man. He had been lying on the ground, wrapped in a blanket. Hey, get out of here. This is my place, and I ain't got nothing for you to steal. I started to warn him, but one of the Hawkbeiger was there. The flashlight beam landed on the homeless man's face. He blinked like an owl. There was an alcove right behind. There was an alcove right behind me. I backed through. The homeless guy screamed. I heard the sound of a scuffle. Maybe the guy got away. I hope so. But I never found out because with the Hawkbeiger distracted, I ran. I ran and ran and ran. And as I ran, I really hoped it was all just a dream. Chapter 7. Somehow I made it home. I don't know how. I have no memories of anything after that last sight of the Hawkbeiger. I wish I had no memories of anything that happened that night. If only I could forget it all. I called around to the others. Everyone was shaky, but they were all alive. Rachel kept trying to apologize for leaving me. Marco just kept asking me if I was sure this wasn't a dream. I guess I should have had the worst nightmares of my life that night, but I didn't. The world of nightmares was a joke compared to my new reality. But by the next morning, a Saturday, I half believed it all had been a nightmare. The only thing that still seemed real, really real, was the way the Andalite had of smiling with just his eyes. I woke when my mom started pounding on my door. "Jake, are you awake in there?" I was now. Yeah, I groaned. "I'm up." "Your friend Tobias is here." "Tobias?" What was Tobias doing here? "It's me," Tobias's voice. "Can I come in?" Sure. I sat up in I sat up in my bed and blinked several times, trying to get my eyes unglued. The door opened. I heard Tobias say thank you to my mom. He was glowing. I swear he was glowing. Not like he was radioactive or anything. I don't mean that. It's just that his eyes were shining bright and his face was one big grin, and he seemed to be tingling with energy. Drank. He seemed to be tingling with energy, bouncing like he couldn't stand still. "I did it," Tobias said. I tried to get my hair to go in one direction by raking my fingers through it. "What are you talking about?" I was yawning when he answered, "I became dude." I stopped yawning. My mouth actually snapped shut. Dude is Tobias's cat. Huh? Tobias glanced around like there might be spies in the room. "I became dude, just like the Andalite said." I just stared. It was so amazing. It didn't hurt or anything. I was pet I was petting him and thinking about the whole thing last night, right? So I thought, why not give it a try? Mm. He was pacing back and forth, snapping his fingers, bursting with enthusiasm, very unlike Tobias. I didn't even know how to begin. So I just made sure the door to my room was locked. Fortunately, my uncle was still asleep. Tobias has the most screwed up family I know. Sorry. Tobias is the most screwed up family I know. He never knew who his father was, and his mom just decided to leave him a few years ago. Since then, he's since then he's been shuttled back and forth between his uncle here and his aunt who lives on the other coast. His aunt and his uncle can't stand each other. Sorry, his aunt and his uncle can't stand each other, and it's like Tobias is some burden they each try to shove off on the other. I get the feeling neither of them cares about Tobias. So there I was, just sitting on my bed, thinking about it, concentrating, thinking about becoming dude. I looked down at my hand. He grinned at me. "What do you think I saw, Jake?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't know." "I had fur, Jake, and I was growing claws. You, sorry, you should have seen the real dude. He went nuts. I had to put him outside before I could morph all the way. He clawed me up pretty good." Tobias stuck a sliced finger into his mouth. I swallowed hard. Okay, this was definitely crazy now. Tobias, is it possible you maybe just dreamed all this?" "Not a dream," he said. Now, now he was serious Tobias again. The grin was gone. It's all true, Jake. All of it. His eyes met mine. I knew what he was saying. Hmm. Sorry, sometimes I look up and see your comments and you are funny. His eyes met mine. I knew what he was saying. He had tried to pretend it was all a nightmare too, but it was real. I looked away. I didn't want to start believing it had all been real. I wanted it all to stay safely stored away in my head. Just another bad dream. Bad dreams should stay in your head, not come jumping out into real life. I just kept concentrating on changing, Tobias said, and in a few minutes, I was not myself anymore. That's both guinea pigs. Hello, friends. His eyes bored in on me. You have no idea what it's like, Jake. Being a cat is I can't even describe it. You're so strong, for one thing. Just all this coiled power and the way you can move. You know what I did? I jumped onto my dresser. 3 feet straight up in the air, and I landed like a feather. 3 feet. You know how high that is when you're a cat? It's like a person jumping maybe 30 feet straight up. He stopped suddenly and looked at me. You don't believe me, do you? He said. Look, Tobias, it's just that sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between something real and something you're just imagining or dreaming. You think I'm crazy. I considered for a minute. I don't know, Tobias. Let's review the facts. You say you turned into your own pet cat, turned into an actual cat. Yes, I have to say that sounds crazy to me. Tobias nodded thoughtfully. He gave a little smile. I understand, Jake. You still don't want it to be true. What? You mean, do I want to believe that you. Sorry. What? You mean, I want to believe you can change yourself into a cat and all the rest of it? Do I want to believe that Earth is being invaded by slimy slugs who live in people's brains and turn them into slaves? Do I want to believe that. That? Duh, no, I don't want to believe any of it. And how about the Andalite? He asked in a quiet voice. I hesitated. I don't know why, but I didn't want to just pretend the Andalite away. Tobias put his hand on my arm. Stand right there. What? What are you going to do? I'm going to help you decide whether it's real or not. Tobias? Just wait, and don't scream or anything. So I waited. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Tobias just Tobias just stood there. I glanced at his face. His eyes were different. The pupils weren't completely round anymore. I swear there was a reflective greenish light in them. And his mouth was protruding a little, puffing out. He was shrinking, growing smaller right before my eyes. The neck of his shirt was loose. His pants started scrunching up at the ankles. He was shriveling. And at the same time, fur, yes, fur, began to grow on his hands and neck and face. It was gray, striped with black, just like dudes. I had this absurd desire to start giggling. Tobias was becoming a tabby cat, but I knew if I started giggling, I'd just keep on and never, ever be able to stop. Tobias was more cat than human now. The pointed ears rose atop his head. The whiskers stuck straight out from beneath his delicate pink nose. He had dropped to all fours. He had dropped to all fours, clothing now half draped over him like so many rags. His tail twitched. Yes, his tail. I wondered if I would just drop dead from the lump that had filled my throat, or from the jackhammer pounding of my heart. Then I wondered if I was still asleep. But if it was a dream, it was a really convincing one. I was standing there in my bedroom, staring down at a gray black cat that less than 2 minutes earlier had been my friend Tobias. Yeah, I don't think their clothes do shrink with them. I think Tobias is now just a tappy cat in a pile of his clothing. Chapter 8. I hope I'm asleep, I muttered. I really do. You're not asleep. Is that you? I demanded of the cat. Can you hear me? Tobias sounded surprised, although sounded wasn't quite the right word. Yes, I said cautiously. I did not know I could send thoughts like this, Tobias said, just like the Andalite. I guess it only works when you're morphed. I am talking to a cat, I realized, and I thought Tobias was crazy. I wondered if Tobias had heard my thought. I concentrated. Tobias, can you hear me? Yeah, he said. I hear you. Did you hear my thoughts before that? I asked out loud. No, I don't think it works that way. I can't hear your thoughts. You have to think at me for me to hear. Hey, watch this. Suddenly, Tobias leapt through the air. He pounced precisely on an autographed baseball that was lying in the corner, maybe a 4-foot jump. That is so excellent. Hey, pull a string for me to chase? Pull a string? Why? Because it's so fun. I dug around in my desk drawer and found a length of string left over from a birthday gift. I'm not exactly big on keeping my room clean. The string was from a birthday 2 years ago. How's this? I drew the string slowly across the floor. A foot or more from Tobias's nose. He settled back on his haunches and began wiggling his hindquarters. He pounced. He landed on the string, grabbed it in his sharp teeth, rolled over, and began ripping at the string like it was the only thing on earth that mattered. I tried pulling the string away, but he pounced again. Yes, got it! Tobias, what are you doing? Pull it faster. I see it. I got it. Tobias, what are you doing? Tobias, I shouted, you're playing with a string. Suddenly, he stopped. His tail twitched. He looked up at me with those cold cat eyes, but I'm sure I saw a look of confusion there. I don't know, he admitted. It's like I'm me, but I'm also dude. I want to I want to chase strings, and oh man, if there was a real live mouse around, I'd really love to track it, to follow it so quietly, to listen to its heartbeat, to hear its scratchy little feet. I'd wait till just the right moment, and then a perfect pounce through the air, claws stretched out. He extended his claws to demonstrate. Tobias, I think we're learning something here, I said. Amazing how quickly I was becoming used to the idea of talking to a cat. What? What are we learning? I think you aren't just Tobias. You really are a cat. I mean, you have all the same instincts. You want to do the things a cat wants to do. Yes, I can feel it. It's like I'm two different animals melded into one. I can think like a person and like a cat. You'd better change back, I said. He nodded his cat head up and down. Very weird to see, I can tell you. A cat nodding yes in a thoughtful, normal way. You're right. The change back to human form was at least as strange as the change to cat. The fur disappeared, leaving behind bare patches leaving bare patches of pink skin behind. A nose grew A nose grew out of the flat cat face. The tail was sucked up like a snake going into a vacuum cleaner. That's normal imagery. Tobias stood there, looking embarrassed. He quickly pulled on his clothes. Maybe with some practice we can figure out how to change back into our clothes? We? He smiled his gentle smile again. Don't you get it yet, Jake? If I can do it, so can you. I shook my head. I don't think so, Tobias. Suddenly, he grew angry. He grabbed me by both my shoulders and actually shook me. Don't you understand, Jake? It's all true. All of it. I pushed him away. I didn't want to hear it. But he kept after me. Jake, it's all true. The Andalite gave us these powers for a reason. Fine, I snapped. You use them. I will, he said. But we'll need you, Jake. You most of all. Why me? He hesitated. Geez, Jake, don't you understand? I know what I can do and what I can't do. I can't make plans and tell people what to do. I'm not a leader. You are. I laughed rudely. I'm not the leader of anything. He just looked at me with those deep, troubled eyes. Eyes I can now see only in my memory. Yes, Jake, you are our leader. You're the one who can bring us all together and help us defeat the controllers. We have the ability to be much more than we are, to have the stealth of a cat and the eyes of eagles and the sense of smell of a dog and the speed of a horse or a cheetah. We're going to need it all if we have any hope of holding out against the controllers. I wanted it not to be true. I wanted it not to be true. I wanted none of it to be true, but I knew that it was. I nodded slowly. It felt like I was agreeing to something awful, like I was volunteering for a trip to the dentist or something much worse. It felt like 1,000,000 pounds of weight had just landed on my shoulders. I knew what I had to do next. Well, I said grimly, I guess I'd better go find Homer. Homer, that's my dog. I think maybe one more chapter since I got started late, if that's okay with everybody else. Chapter 9. It isn't painful. Morphing, I mean. I petted Homer for a while, feeling like a complete and total fool. This is the stupidest thing I have ever done, I told Tobias. Look, you have to concentrate. At least I did. I mean, I formed this mental picture of Dude, right? I thought about becoming him. Sorry. I see. So I have to meditate on becoming a dog. That's right. You have to think about it. You have to want it. Normally I would have figured he was nuts, but I had just seen him turn into a cat. So if he was nuts, so was I. I thought of Sorry. I probably took your previous ooh yeah as an answer to the question I had just asked, and that was not the case, I see. I thought about becoming Homer. As I stroked his fur, I formed a picture in my mind of becoming Homer. Homer became weirdly quiet while I did it, like he was asleep, only his eyes were open. Just like Dude, Tobias commented. I think the process kind of puts the animal into a trance or something. Hmm. He's just scared because he thinks his master is a Looney Tune. I continued stroking Homer's fur and concentrating, and Homer continued to lie very still. Okay, now what? I asked Tobias. Now we better put Homer outside. He might get slightly freaked by watching you turn into him. It took It took Homer about 10 seconds to come out of his trance, but then he jumped up, normal, hyperactive Homer again. I put him outside in the yard. Tobias was sitting patiently when I got back, just waiting. Give it a try, he urged me. Think about it. Want it. I took a deep breath. I closed my eyes. I recalled the picture of Homer I'd formed in my mind. I thought about becoming Homer. I opened my eyes. Bow wow, I said. Guess it didn't work for me, Tobias. The back of my hand itched, and so I scratched it. Jake, Tobias said. What? Look at your hand. I looked at my hand. It was covered with orange fur. I jumped about a foot straight up in the air. Oh, go! I stared at my hand. The fur had stopped growing. Don't be scared, Tobias advised. Go with it. Now you've stopped the morph. You have to concentrate. My hand, I said. Fur. Yeah, and your ears, Tobias said. I ran to the mirror over my dresser. My ears had moved. They had slid up the side of my head and were definitely larger than they should be. Go on, it's so cool, Tobias said. Cool? It's creepy. It's weird. Look at my hands, I have fur. You have to do this, Tobias said. I don't have to do anything, I said sullenly. Tobias nodded. Okay, you're right. You don't have to do this. You can just forget what we saw last night and forget what we know. And as the Yerks take over more and more people, you can just ignore it. We can all just go along and grow up in a world where human beings are nothing but bodies to be used by murdering aliens. Okay, when he put it that way, it didn't sound like such a great option. Come on, Tobias urged. I swallowed hard. I closed my eyes. I thought of Homer, of being Homer. I felt the itchiness again, and when I opened my eyes, there was fur growing on my arms, and fur growing out of my face, and fur curling up from under my collar. My legs itched, and I realized they were growing fur too. My bones? Well, they didn't exactly hurt, but they did feel very strange. You know, you know when you go to the dentist and he gives you Novocaine so the drill doesn't really hurt, but you know it should hurt? I guess that's what it's like. My bones shortened. My bones shortened. I could feel my backbone stretching as it extended out into a tail. There was a scraping sound as my knees suddenly reversed direction. I toppled forward, no longer able to walk upright. When my hands hit the floor, they weren't exactly hands anymore. The fingers were gone. All that was left were short, stubby nails. My face bulged out. My eyes drew closer together. Tobias got up and tilted the mirror down so I could see myself. That sounds like a horrible thing to do, Tobias. I watched the final transformation as the last patches of my pink human flesh disappeared, and the tail, my tail, sprouted to its full length. I was a dog. It was insane, but just the same, I was a dog. I knew I should be scared by all this, only I wasn't. I was ecstatic. I was giddy. I was thrilled. Happiness just washed over me. Happiness filled me up. I breathed in through my ridiculously long nose, and wow, the smells. Oh man, you have no idea. I breathed in, and right away I knew my mom was toasting a waffle in the kitchen, And I knew Tobias had walked through the territory of a big male dog, and I knew things I couldn't even explain in human words. It was like being blind all your life, and then suddenly you can see. I ran over to Tobias and sniffed his shoe. I wanted a better idea of who that big male dog was. From the scent of his urine picked up by Tobias's shoe, I got a sort of picture of him. See, Homer knew him. His owners called him Streak. He was neutered, like me. He spent most of his time in his yard, but he broke out sometimes by digging under his fence. He got a mix of canned and dry food, Purina, no table scraps, unlike me. All this information made me happy all over again, and I had to wag my tail. I looked up at Tobias. He looked tall and strange, and not very colorful. I wasn't all that interested in looking at stuff. Smelling things was way better. Intruder! Say, intruder! There was a noise in the yard. A dog, an unknown dog in my yard. An intruder! I ran to the window and perched against it and cut loose. Arf, 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 arf. I barked as loud as I could. No way some unknown dog was just going to walk through my yard. Jake, get a grip, Tobias said. That's Homer out there. Homer? What? But I tucked my tail between my legs. What was going on? Jake, listen. Jake, listen to me, Tobias said. It's just what happened to me when I morphed into a cat. The dog brain is part of your brain now. You have to deal with it. But there's a dog in my yard. That's Homer, Jake. You are Jake. You're just in a body copied from Homer's DNA. That's the real Homer out there. You put him out there. Focus. You are Jake. Jake. I took several deep breaths. The smells. Oh boy. There was this one smell I couldn't quite. Focus, Jake, I ordered myself. Focus. Slowly, I calmed the dog part of my mind. Let go of the smells. Let go of the sound of a dog out in your yard. It wasn't easy that first time. Being a dog is so completely amazing. For one thing, there's nothing halfway about it. You're never sort of happy. You're happy! You're never sort of bummed. You're totally, completely bummed. And boy, when you get hungry in dog form, you are nuts about the subject of food. There was a knock on my bedroom door. Yes, my bedroom door. I knew who I was again. I was Jake. Jake with 4 legs, a tail, and a snout, but Jake. The knocking seemed incredibly loud to my dog ears. Jake, you got Homer in there with you? My brother Tom's voice. Mom's on the phone. Stop him yapping. He opened the door and stepped in. He looked around, confused. Who are you? He demanded of Tobias. I'm Tobias. I'm a friend of Jake's. Well, where is he? Oh, he's around, Tobias said. Tom looked down at me. There was a strange smell about him. My dog brain couldn't quite identify it. It was an unsettling, dangerous smell. And some. Sorry. My dog brain couldn't quite identify it. It was an unsettling, dangerous smell. And somehow, in my own mind, I heard the echo of a laugh. A very human laugh I had heard the night before as Visser 3 swallowed the Andalite whole. Bad dog, Tom said to me. You keep quiet. Bad dog. And then he left. I was devastated. I wasn't a bad dog. No, really. I was just barking because some other dog was in my yard. Bad dog? I was a bad dog? No, I wanted to be a good dog. I crept into the corner, utterly miserable. Tobias knelt down and patted my head. When he scratched me behind the ears, I felt a little better. Okay, I think I had better stop there before getting into something else. Yeah. Thank you so much for sticking with me through some technical difficulties. I hope I will know not to make that same mistake again, and I will hope to see you again next week. Thank you so much. Good night for now. Thank you.